Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you are part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is the founder of Unruly Splats. Her name is Bryanne Leeming. Before we invite Bryanne in, we want to invite you to check out Solve It for Kids, the Solve It for Kids podcast. It is a fantastic podcast that I co-host with our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, the Admiral of Adventure, Jennifer Swanson. We have had such an amazing time. We have interviewed Grammy-winning composers, astronauts, aquanauts, famous oceanographers, nuclear physicists, robotic scientists, rocket scientists. It's just amazing. I can't believe that I can even keep up with some of the conversation. This is a fantastic podcast that gives kids and families a chance to peek into the real world of scientists, physicists, astronauts, aquanauts, as they solve problems in their jobs using cooperation, creativity, and critical thinking. It's a fantastic way to start conversations with your kids about the STEM and the STEAM fields. Check it out today. The program is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, just about everywhere you can find your podcast. And, of course, you can learn more by going to our website, solveitforkids.com. Joining us right now from right down the street in Boston, Massachusetts. So excited to welcome neighbor to the Reading with Your Kids podcast to talk about Unruly Splats. Please welcome to the show, Bryanne Leeming. Bryanne, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you, Jed?
I'm really excited. I love talking about fun ways that kids can learn, especially fun ways that kids can learn something that I used to think of as like wicked boring. And that's the impression I get from Unruly Splats. Why don't we just start by you giving us an overall idea of what this cool product is?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show. So Unruly Splats, what we do, our mission is that we combine STEM learning with active recess style play for kids in elementary and middle school. So we partner directly with schools to bring this in. And the way it works is we have these programmable floor buttons they light up, they make sound, and they sense when they're stomped on by kids or adults. And so those are called splats. Sorry here. And the way that they work is they connect through Bluetooth to a tablet or a Chromebook, whatever they're using at the school, and then kids can actually code their own rules to new active games. So the kind of games they play range from like relay races where they're running back and forth between the splats and timing their score, or they're keeping score on a whack-a-mole game or like an arcade style game, or even just setting up a really interactive obstacle course or things like that. So that's kind of the style of play. So it's a technology that you can jump on, and we just had brought it out to schools about a year ago. So we are a new brand in this space, but combining STEM with active play.
This sounds really, really amazing. Now, I'm almost 100 years old, but, they just were starting to do coding in high school when I was a kid. I wanted no part of it because, my friends who took it, they said it's punching in these ones and zeros and they show me the lines of code and I go, nah, that ain't for me. But this just sounds really engaging. It's something that kids can really get into.
Absolutely, yeah. And the way that we started is with a block-based coding language. So it's based on something called MIT's Scratch programming language. We work with one of the early Scratch team members, Dr. Aman Milner, on the language that we've written ourselves. And it makes learning coding much more approachable. It's drag and drop, very colorful, kind of takes the logic of coding, but puts it into a system that even kids as young as kindergarten can start to learn the logic and computational thinking without getting into a text-based language. So that's kind of how we've started to make it approachable and really fun.
Yeah. So how does it work actually? The splat, you step on it here and it makes something else happen. Help me figure that out.
Absolutely. So it's basically like a big button, and it goes on off, and you jump on it, and you get to change the rules to whatever you want it to be. But the computer essentially tells the splats what color to be, or what pattern to light up, or what sound to play. So we have a bunch of sounds in there. They can even do music sounds and make a big piano or things like that. So you kind of are just telling the button what to do. And then once you've created your program, you send it across to the splats, and then you just play. And so you can start with, we have a bunch of preloaded games as well, but one of my favorites is a great relay race. That's a big team game. And so you've got like 4 splats. So it's the start line and the finish line for 2 teams, and you are running back and forth. The splats are on a random though. So you don't actually, the fastest player doesn't always win this relay race, because you have to get the splat to become green in order for your points to count, but it's on a random color generator. So you never know. It could take you 100 steps. It could take you 1 for green to pop up. So things like that, like that the computer can allow this like randomness to come in and make it really fun and silly.
Wow, that does sound like fun. And it's a great way to integrate, as you know, physical activity like gym class, make gym class like really educational and thoughtful and intentional, and at the same time getting kids interested in this STEM activity. Where did this come from? Where did you get the brainstorm to create this?
So it came from an experience starting with that I had at school. I grew up in New Hampshire, and at the public school I went to, I was exposed to coding when I was 8 years old. Didn't really realize at the time, but later I took a computer science class in college, and I realized that I had already learned the foundations of that language when I was 8 years old. And so it kind of came full circle. I ended up working in technology in my career, and I felt like what we needed in the space was there was sort of an opening where the way that kids typically learn, it's not the way that computer science is typically given to kids, which is most options were pretty solitary, sedentary activities. So you're sitting alone at a computer for hours to learn, which is one way to learn. But I think most kids, with my experience working lots of summer camps and things, like they learn through play, through collaboration, group games, social. And so I wanted to make an option that kind of was more approachable for STEM through that type of play, like the type of play you'd play in PE or after school or in a gym class or in like a fun kind of sports environment. So that's kind of where the initial idea came from. And I started putting together the team locally with people, for instance, Dr. Ramon Milner with his background from scratch. And then we have our designer who comes from Nickelodeon and Disney, and just kind of trying to incorporate fun and play wherever we could.
It makes real sense to me. And as I'm thinking back to when I was a kid before there were computers, I know that I hated math. But I loved figuring out batting averages when I would go to Fenway, and when me and my kids, my buddies would play baseball. We'd sit there, and I would sit there doing all those computations. And it took a while before someone came along and kind of gave me a dope stop and said, "Hey, dummy, you're doing math right now with this, for all these statistics." And I said, "Oh, great. Is this something that the kids are experiencing? They're having fun, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm learning too."
Definitely. And that was always with our team, with the Unruly team, that was always the design goal. We wanted to lead with the fun. So we put a bunch of silly sounds in there. We make it really, really fun, and they don't even realize for a little while that they're learning. And then the great thing about doing this through recess style games is that kids create the rules really easily. They do that automatically on the playground. So things like tag, how many variations there are of tag, of freeze tag and TV tag and all these things. So they constantly are kind of thinking of new rules for games. And so this just kind of takes that and lets them do it at a wider scale and put it into this technology and create their own. And so, yeah, they learn without even really realizing, which was always the goal.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of people out there who that use computers, and we all use technology and everything these days. Why do you think it's important for kids to have an understanding of coding?
I think it's incredibly important just because of how technology is so involved in everything in our lives today. So no matter what careers kids go into in the future, even if you're working in art or in music or any industry, there's going to be an element of technology. And I think that knowing at least the basics, you don't have to become a developer, become a programmer, but knowing the basics really gets you a step ahead of being able to collaborate online and collaborate over technology and build new things together. And so I just think it's so important for kids to learn. I think learning the beginner logic of it all too, it teaches you how to think, which is something that Steve Jobs always used to say, is that learning, all kids should learn to code because it teaches you how to think. And I really like that because I think that was true for me and that impacted my life. And I want more kids to have that experience, but in a really positive way.
Can you expand on that? How is it that coding helps you learn how to think?
I think it's the basics of how computers work and just logic in general. It's the same logic that's used to make a logical argument, for instance, or to form sentences. And you can learn that in a way through computers and through computer science. And, computers are the most logical thing there is. And so, I think that's kind of where it resonates for me.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. It's, everything has to be, you have to tell the computer everything to do. It doesn't just do things on its own.
And that's the fun part is when that's where you get bugs really, especially with the splats, is when you forget something about the fact that a computer doesn't know what you're telling it. So you might intend for it to do something and then it does something completely different. Like you're intending for splat 1 to light up, but you forgot to put that part in. And so it lights up splat 5. Then all of a sudden you have to realize that was actually my mistake. The computer did what I told it to, but I need to change my directions for it. And kind of that learning happens really quickly with splats, and it's meant to be kind of a low barrier to entry, and get kids making those mistakes because that teaches them so much. As soon as they learn that and then they make the change, they won't make that mistake again. And then they're kind of learning through making mistakes and through that resilience.
Yeah. That's something that we've talked a lot about here on the podcast, just that, helping kids learn that grit and the resiliency and understand that it's okay to fail, that it's just, you're taking a step towards learning. Can you talk a little bit more about how Splat can help kids gain that?
Yeah, and I would say that's a lesson that comes through sports as well, which is why Splats is such a great tool for that type of learning. Is through games and sports, you're constantly kind of trying new things and falling over and like making mistakes. And the same process happens when you're learning to code or learning a complex technology like that. And so with both of those things, by incorporating play, making it silly, having the silly sounds in it that we do, it makes it a really kind of approachable and open environment to do that experimentation. And it doesn't feel like failure. You're often working in a team in our classroom setting. We often have kids in groups of 4 or 5 working on some splats together. And so it's just a really nice environment to make those mistakes and have some fun doing it. And it really teaches you in the long run that resiliency. And the thing that I think works really well is that kids can immediately have this end goal in mind with splats because it's so simple. It's just an on-off button. It incorporates rules around games that they already know and love, like they would play on a playground. And so by doing that, they immediately think, okay, I want to make zombie tag, and they completely create the rules in their head. And then that is sort of the goal that drives them, and they are able to be resilient through some bugs and things. So we'll always hear from teachers. Like one teacher we heard from in Hawaii recently had said, one of my students, she was trying to code. She was a 4th grader trying to code on the splats, and that she was having trouble with this. And this one part, she couldn't get it to work. She couldn't get the delay timer to delay 5 seconds before the game was over. And, she was asking the teacher and all these things. And he was like, I don't actually know how to do that either. And so he's like, I'll look into it after class. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, she ran up to him and she's like, I figured it out. And I played around with it and I figured it out. And that kind of is what we're going for, is that resilience, because she knew what she wanted it to do. And so that drives her to try different things and try it out and then finally ultimately get that solution.
That's neat. And so typically just kind of walk us through this, is this like a week-long activity that a class would do for an hour each day? Does it take a month to create the program before kids can get out there and play it?
So we have tons of different lesson plans that span all different kinds of pieces of the school day. So you had mentioned PE. We work with PE teachers a lot, but we also go into technology classes, and we have a lot of teachers bringing it into everyday classes as well, and even music classes. And so it's kind of a full school tool is how we work with schools. So it's meant to be shared across the school. It's meant to be, maybe you code some games in tech class or a STEM or science, and then you're bringing that into PE to play with your class or things like that. So it kind of can move around. And in that way, we've also put out a bunch of lessons over the summer and through COVID, just knowing how important social emotional learning is right now in schools, and hearing that from our school partners, was we actually put out our own lesson plans around social emotional learning, specifically targeting things like communication skills, building relationships, collaboration skills, whether students are learning at home or at school. And so that can really fit into any time of day where teachers are trying to incorporate social emotional learning and group activities. So we've kind of built it to be a tool that can be super flexible throughout the day and also through virtual learning as well.
How does that work? How do we learn these emotional skills, how to get along with each other and be cooperative and to have empathy through jumping on splats and coding on a lifeless computer?
Yeah, so I think in that way, it's all about the social interaction that kids are having with each other when they're playing Splats. So initially, when we set out to build Splats, it was all about that group play, but we didn't call it social emotional learning at that time. We were just always trying to incorporate group play. We were always looking for moments where kids were having eye contact with each other, for instance, instead of one-on-one with the computer. So you do use the computer to code Splats, but it's sort of separate from you code them and then you play on the Splats together. And you go back and forth between that, and you iterate your game, and then you come back and you play it. And so that's kind of where all of a sudden over the summer we realized, looking at some of the social emotional learning standards schools were working on through CASEL specifically, that we already hit a lot of the targets of these programs without even really changing anything. Because play naturally does that. Builds relationships. There are moments of conflict when you're building something new as a group, of course, and that's something that we dive into, and we give teachers tools around how to kind of dive into that. When kids are building a game together, there's bound to be moments where they disagree or things like that, and sort of working through that moment, including when they're playing games, as you know. There's always going to be moments where there's a disagreement or you're not sure, you need a referee almost. And that's a great moment for learning for kids, learning losing, learning winning, with respect and respect in general. And so all of these things that just naturally kind of fit into play in general. And we found we were a really good fit. And so some teachers were asking for social emotional learning content, and we've really, due to COVID and things, we've really dove into that and been doing lots of webinars around that topic and just really diving into it with our schools.
Yeah. You mentioned COVID a couple of times, and you rolled out last year. So you must have been one of these startups that really had to do a hard pivot when all of a sudden it's like, hey, we got this thing. We're going to be working with schools, and kids are going to be together and jumping on this thing. And what do you mean they're all at home and they're not going to be in school anymore? What's up? What was your reaction at the headquarters in Boston when that happened?
Yeah, it's definitely crazy because we had built the company off of in-person social interaction. So of course, we had to, take a pause. First of all, the schools that we work with were going through, of course, a crisis moment. And so we took the time to really support them in any way we could, and did that work over the summer. But what was great is that we actually, through our app, we have virtual Splats on the app. So you can test out your game on our app and try out your game before you actually play it in the real world and kind of connect to Bluetooth and send it over to the Splats. So by using that, we were able to create some really amazing lessons that could be played at home through Zoom or just asynchronous. And it was able to kind of get kids still from home off the screen, getting exercise. We made a big fitness challenge that's, push-ups and things like that as well. And you're still using the on-screen Splats, and you're using them for your timing, for keeping score, for keeping count. And so we've got a really fun activity that's like a found art thing where it's timing you. You have to go around your house and find a green object and then a blue object based on the splat colors on the screen. And then you create this beautiful sculpture from what you find around your house and things like that. So lots of ways to still get kids engaging in the real world, even from home.
Now, you mentioned a couple of times that this is something that you're working with schools. Are Splats something that homeschooling families can take advantage of?
We have had several homeschooling families reach out over the years. We definitely kind of our main partner is schools. We've seen that Splats work really well in environments where there are groups of kids and that it's like kind of a wider activity with, we have even some PE classes using 60 students at a time with the 12 Splats and things like that. So we definitely do that. We do a lot of summer camps, after school programs as well. But lots of spaces, but we do always have that request as well. And we found it best to partner with teachers because they have this incredible and amazing way to sort of take Splats as an open-ended tool and adapt it to what they're doing in class already. And that's the best part is because it's programmable, the teachers also can kind of make those changes. So if they need to slow down the game for a certain group of students, they can do that. Or if they want to use it as a Jeopardy buzzer for something they're learning about in their history class, then they can do that and kind of use it as that adaptable tool.
One of the things that I like about this as you're speaking about it is I think it's a great way, in addition to coding and getting kids active and learning how to be cooperative and everything, I think it's a great way to help kids understand that this technology that we're all wrapped up in, it's a tool, and we're in control of it, and we always should be in control of it, and getting kids to think about it in that way. I just watched a documentary on Netflix, I think Social Disruption or Disorder or something like that, talking about how the algorithms in social media kind of mess with us. If kids can learn from something like Splat at a young age to be aware of, what technology is doing to them when they get into the teen years and social media, I think that would be awesome.
Oh, absolutely agree with you. I think it's really empowering to see, even at the simplest moment, like I tell this Splat to be green and now it is green, and like kind of see that you have control over the technology. You don't just have to consume it. But that opens you up to thinking when you're, kind of going through your life that, you can make changes. You can create the technology. Technology can be used to collaborate, and how you might do that best. And also kind of being conscious of what you're putting out into the world is really important too. And I think the kids today are really conscious of that. And I'm excited to give them this tool of being able to create with technology.
That's excellent. Hey, Bryanne, tell us where we can find out about it. I know that not everybody listening is a teacher or a principal, but if you're a parent and you're listening to this and this sounds like something that you think the kids in your kid's school would benefit from, I'm imagining that a parent can go online, learn a little bit about it, and then share that information with the principal?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find us at unrulysplats.com. And we're on Twitter, unruly_studios. And yes, so definitely check it out. And we would love to partner with your schools or find a way to work with your after school program, summer camps, anything like that. But yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, we've had an exciting time speaking with the creator of Unruly Splats, Bryanne Leeming. Bryanne, thanks so much for taking time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We will be celebrating Diwali, the fantastic holiday that folks all across India and all across the world celebrate, with our guest, Anjanta Chakraborty. It's a really, really fun and eye-opening interview that you don't want to miss. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are an author of a fantastic children's book, you may be frustrated that the ways that authors traditionally promote their books to kids and families, well, they're just not available. As the country is going back into various stages of lockdown, school visits are not available. Library visits, for the most part, are not available. Book signings are few and far between. We have a solution that has helped so many authors. It's called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. If our panel believes that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And with that status comes a number of fantastic tools that can really help your book stand out from the crowd of books. And we're talking thousands of books that are published every single month. Check it out today. Just go to our brand new website, certifiedgreatread.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank the team over at Unruly Splats, and of course, their founder, Bryanne Leeming. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, but most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.